A winter encounter, the start of something new. The crisp air of December filled Central Park as Barron Trump wandered along the snow-dusted pathways, his long coat buttoned tightly against the chill. Holiday lights glimmered from afar, illuminating the park in a golden glow. But despite the festive scene, Barron felt a deep sense of detachment. His days were filled with obligations, yet something essential seemed missing. He yearned for a connection, a spark of meaning in the cold expanse of his world. As he walked, his guards trailing discreetly behind, Barron noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench. The man's hunched shoulders and tear-brimmed eyes hinted at a sorrow that pierced through the holiday cheer. Curiosity mixed with concern, compelling Barron to approach. "Hi, I'm Barron," he said gently. "Are you okay?" The old man looked up, startled at first, but soon softened. "I'm George," he replied, his voice shaky but kind. "Just thinking about my wife. She passed away last year. The holidays are tough without her." Barron sat beside him, sensing the weight of unspoken sadness. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said sincerely. "Would you like some company?" George nodded, his eyes glistening. For the first time in months, someone had noticed his pain, and even more importantly, they had cared. As the evening deepened, the two shared stories. Barron spoke of his life, a mix of privilege and pressure, while George recounted tales of his late wife, their shared adventures, and the laughter that once filled their home. By the end of the night, both felt an unexpected bond. George found solace in Barron's presence, while Barron discovered the profound satisfaction of offering kindness to a stranger. The next morning, Barron couldn't shake the memory of George's stories. Despite his packed schedule, he made time to return to Central Park. Each day, their connection grew stronger. George regaled Barron with tales of his youth and the love he once shared, while Barron marveled at the man's resilience. The friendship blossomed into something neither had anticipated, a lifeline of warmth in the coldest season. One afternoon, Barron arrived with a gift. "I thought you might like this," he said, handing George a blank photo album. "Maybe we can fill it with your memories." George's hands trembled as he accepted the album. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This means more to me than you know." Barron and George spent hours flipping through old photos, George recounting each cherished memory. The young man listened intently, his admiration for the older man growing with every story. This simple act of listening and caring ignited a sense of purpose in Barron and rekindled George's spirit. For the first time in years, George felt that he wasn't alone. As Christmas approached, Barron decided to orchestrate something extraordinary. With the help of his guards, he tracked down George's old friends and neighbors. Many had drifted apart over the years, but all were eager to reconnect when they learned of George's loneliness. On Christmas Eve, Barron led George to a cozy cafe adorned with festive lights. George's face lit up in disbelief as he saw the room filled with familiar faces. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he embraced long-lost friends, their laughter filling the air. "Barron, I don't know how to thank you," George said, overwhelmed. "You don't have to," Barron replied with a warm smile. "Everyone deserves happiness, especially you." That night, George rediscovered the joy of companionship and the enduring power of human connection. For Barron, the evening solidified a lesson he would carry for life. The smallest gestures of kindness can create the most profound changes. Yet, amidst the newfound joy, Barron noticed an unresolved sadness in George. One snowy afternoon, as they walked through the park, he gently asked, "George, is there something else you regret? Something unresolved?" George hesitated before sighing deeply. "I suppose there is. My wife and I had a daughter, Emily. After her mother died, we had a falling out. I haven't seen her in years." Barron stopped in his tracks, stunned. "You have a daughter? Why didn't you tell me?" "I was ashamed," George admitted. "I wasn't there for her when she needed me. I let my grief consume me, and I pushed her away." Barron placed a reassuring hand on George's shoulder. Maybe it's not too late. It's Christmas. A time for miracles. Let's try to find her. That evening, Barron sought help from his security team. We need to find George's daughter, he told Richard, his head of security. Her name is Emily, but we don't have much more information. This might take some time, Richard warned. But we'll do our best. The next day, Barron broached the subject with George, who reluctantly provided the last known details about Emily. Despite his fears of rejection, George agreed to let Barron try. Days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Richard's team followed leads across the state, but each promising trail ended in disappointment. Barron grew frustrated but refused to give up. Finally, on Christmas Eve morning, Richard burst into the room with good news. "We found her," he said breathlessly. "She's living in a small apartment upstate." Barron wasted no time. "Let's bring George to her." The drive to Emily's home was filled with anticipation and nerves. George's hands trembled as he clutched the photo album Barron had given him. "What if she doesn't want to see me?" he whispered. Barron smiled reassuringly. "She'll see how much you care, George. That's what matters." When they arrived, George hesitated at the door, his heart pounding. With Barron by his side, he knocked. Moments later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her 30s, her eyes widening in surprise. "Dad," she whispered, tears welling up. "I'm so sorry, Emily," George said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong to push you away. I've missed you every day." Emily hesitated before stepping forward and wrapping her arms around her father. "I've missed you too." That Christmas, George, Emily, and Barron shared a simple meal together, filled with stories, laughter, and healing. For Barron, the experience was transformative. He had not only witnessed but facilitated the miracle of reconciliation. For George, it was a new beginning, a chance to mend broken bonds and embrace the love he thought he had lost forever. As the snow fell gently outside, Barron realized that sometimes the greatest gifts aren't material. They're moments of connection, acts of compassion, and the courage to heal. And in bringing joy to others, he had found a deeper joy within himself. The journey to reconciliation. The warmth of Emily's embrace lingered in George's mind long after the door to her small apartment had closed behind them. The drive back to the city that Christmas Eve was silent, but not in a way that felt empty. Instead, it was a quiet filled with thought, hope, and the beginnings of a healing journey. Barron glanced at George from across the car. The older man seemed different now, lighter, yet contemplative, as if the pieces of a fractured life were slowly coming together. "You did it, George," Barron said softly, breaking the silence. "You faced your fears." George nodded, his eyes misty. "I owe it all to you, Barron. You gave me the courage to try, but I realize now that finding Emily was just the first step. Rebuilding what we lost will take time." Barron's lips curved into a small smile. Good things always take time. The following day, George awoke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Emily had invited him to dinner later that week, a sign that she, too, wanted to mend their relationship. But George was nervous. What would he say to her? Could they truly overcome the years of distance and pain? Sensing George's unease, Barron paid him an early visit. The young man had brought coffee and pastries from a local cafe, and the two sat by George's small window, the city's skyline glittering in the distance. "I'm proud of you, George," Barron said, breaking a comfortable silence. "But you know, this isn't just about making things right for Emily. It's also about forgiving yourself." George looked at him, surprised. "Forgiving myself?" Barron nodded. "You've been carrying so much guilt, but holding on to it won't help you or Emily. You've already taken the hardest step by reaching out to her. Now you need to believe that you're worthy of her forgiveness." George sighed deeply, his weathered hands clutching his coffee mug. "It's hard, Barron. I've spent so many years replaying my mistakes. How do I let go of that?" Barron thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe it's not about letting go. Maybe it's about accepting that you did the best you could at the time and focusing on what you can do now. As the week went on, Barron continued to visit George, helping him prepare for the dinner with Emily. They rehearsed conversations, shared laughs over George's stories of his past, and even ventured out to pick up a small bouquet of flowers. George insisted it was the least he could bring to his daughter. Finally, the evening arrived. George dressed in his best suit, his nervous energy palpable. Barron walked him to the front of Emily's building, offering a reassuring pat on the back. "You've got this," Barron said with a grin. "Just be yourself." George nodded, clutching the bouquet tightly as he stepped inside. Barron watched him go, feeling a swell of pride. He knew this wasn't the end of George's journey. It was the beginning of something beautiful. The dinner was both awkward and heartwarming. George and Emily shared tentative conversations at first, but as the evening progressed, laughter replaced hesitation. They reminisced about old memories, and George listened intently as Emily spoke about her own life, her struggles, her dreams, and the things she had achieved despite their estrangement. By the time dessert was served, the air was lighter, and George felt a glimmer of hope. He realized that while he couldn't change the past, he could be present for Emily now. And that was enough. Meanwhile, Barron's life was changing too. His friendship with George had sparked something inside him, a desire to do more, to use his influence to make a difference. Inspired by the transformation he had witnessed in George, Barron began brainstorming ways to help others who felt lost or disconnected. One snowy afternoon, he sat in his family's penthouse, jotting down ideas. What if he could create a program to reconnect families, or organize events to bring together people who felt isolated, especially during the holidays? His mind buzzed with possibilities. Richard, his trusted security chief, noticed the papers scattered across the table. "Planning something big, Barron?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. Barron smiled. "Just thinking about how I can do more. Meeting George showed me how powerful a simple act of kindness can be. I want to expand on that." Richard chuckled. "You've got a good heart, kid. Whatever you decide, I'll back you." As weeks turned into months, George and Emily's relationship continued to grow. They started meeting regularly, and Emily even introduced George to her close friends. The photo album Barron had gifted George became a symbol of their renewed bond. Together, they filled its pages with new memories, pictures of shared meals, trips to the park, and quiet moments of reconciliation. Barron remained a constant presence in George's life, offering support and encouragement. But he didn't stop there. With Richard's help, he launched a community initiative called Hearts Reunited. The program aimed to reconnect families, provide resources for those dealing with loss, and foster a sense of belonging for anyone feeling alone. The inaugural event, held in Central Park, was a resounding success. George was the guest of honor, sharing his story with a crowd of strangers who quickly became friends. His tale of loss, healing, and rediscovery resonated deeply, inspiring others to take the first steps toward their own reconciliation. By the time the following holiday season arrived, George's life had transformed. He no longer spent his days on that lonely bench in Central Park. Instead, he was surrounded by love, both from Emily and the new friends he had made through Hearts Reunited. As for Barron, he had found his purpose. The young man who once felt disconnected had become a beacon of hope for others, proving that even the smallest gestures of kindness could ripple outward and create profound change. And so, on a chilly December evening, as snow fell softly over the city, Barron and George sat together once more. This time, they weren't strangers brought together by chance. They were family, bound not by blood, but by the shared journey of mending hearts and embracing the beauty of second chances, a legacy of love. As the seasons turned, Barron and George's friendship became the cornerstone of something far greater than either of them could have imagined. What began as a chance encounter in Central Park had blossomed into a profound bond, not only transforming their lives, but also inspiring a ripple effect of kindness across their community. The following spring, Hearts Reunited, Barron's initiative, had gained significant traction. Its mission, to help people reconnect with loved ones, bridge gaps caused by time and misunderstandings, and combat loneliness, resonated with people from all walks of life. What made the program unique was its deeply personal touch. Every story mattered. Every relationship was worth rebuilding. George was now a frequent speaker at events organized by the initiative. His humility, humor, and raw honesty captivated audiences. He spoke about the power of forgiveness, the courage it takes to confront one's mistakes, and the incredible healing that can come from reaching out. "I thought I had lost everything," George would tell the crowd. "But thanks to a young man who stopped to ask if I was okay, I found my daughter, my community, and myself again." Don't underestimate the power of a small act of kindness. It can change everything. One particularly memorable event was held on Mother's Day. Families of all kinds gathered in a blooming park, the air filled with laughter and hope. George and Emily were among the guests of honor. For George, this day had always been bittersweet, a reminder of his late wife and the family he once feared he had lost. But this year, it was different. Emily's presence by his side brought a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Barron, who stood quietly in the background, observed the father and daughter laughing together as they planted flowers in a community garden. It was moments like these that fueled his determination to keep growing Hearts Reunited. Meanwhile, Barron's life was undergoing a transformation of its own. The once reserved and introspective young man had grown into a confident advocate for human connection. His family, though initially surprised by his deep involvement in the initiative, became his greatest supporters. His parents attended several events, donating resources and encouraging his efforts. One evening, as Barron and George sat in George's modest apartment, George leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know, Barron," he began, "I used to think that people only get one shot at happiness. If you miss it, that's it. But you've shown me that there's always another chance, as long as you're brave enough to take it." Barron chuckled. "You took that chance, George. I just gave you a little push." "No," George said firmly, his eyes twinkling. "You gave me hope, and that's the greatest gift anyone can give." Despite all the success, Barron never lost sight of the initiative's roots. He still made time for George, visiting him regularly, whether to play chess, share a meal, or simply talk. One afternoon, George surprised Barron with a request. "I've been thinking," George said, his voice soft. "It's time to honor my wife's memory in a way that reflects the love she gave me, and the second chance you've given me." Barron raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" George's eyes sparkled with emotion. "I want to sponsor a program within Hearts Reunited to help widows and widowers find support. No one should feel as alone as I did after losing someone they love." Barron's heart swelled with pride. "That's a beautiful idea, George. Let's make it happen." The program, aptly named Evelyn's Embrace, after George's late wife, became a cornerstone of Hearts Reunited. Its mission was simple yet profound: to create spaces where those grieving a loss could share their stories, find comfort in community, and rediscover joy. The program offered group sessions, social outings, and even mentorship pairings for younger individuals experiencing loss. George became the face of the initiative, his story of love, loss, and renewal touching countless lives. At every event, he carried the photo album Barron had gifted him, now brimming with both old memories and new ones. It was a symbol of his journey, a testament to the power of connection. By the time the next holiday season arrived, Hearts Reunited had expanded beyond New York City, with branches springing up across the country. People of all ages and backgrounds joined the movement, each inspired by the simple yet profound message: it's never too late to reconnect, to heal, and to love. On Christmas Eve, Barron hosted a special gathering in Central Park, the place where it all began. The event was magical, with snowflakes falling gently and twinkling lights illuminating the night. Hundreds of people gathered, sharing stories, laughter, and hugs. George, now a beloved figure in the community, stood on the stage, addressing the crowd. "This season is about more than just gifts and celebrations," he said, his voice steady and filled with emotion. "It's about the gift of connection, the courage to reach out, the strength to forgive, and the hope to begin again. None of us are ever truly alone. We just need to find each other." As the crowd erupted in applause, Barron stood off to the side, his heart full. He glanced at George, who met his gaze and gave him a small, knowing nod. This was the legacy they had built together, a legacy of love, hope, and second chances. Later that night, as Barron and George walked through the quiet park, the older man paused. "You know, Barron, I used to think that my story was over, but now I see it's just another chapter." Barron smiled. "And the best chapters are still ahead." As they walked on, the city's lights sparkling around them, Barron felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that his life's greatest achievement wasn't in his name or status. It was in the lives he had touched and the love he had helped reignite. Together, they had proven that even in the coldest winters, the warmth of human connection could light the way forward. And in that moment, beneath the starry sky, both Barron and George knew that their journey was far from over. It was only the beginning. The greatest gift. As the years passed, Hearts Reunited grew into a global movement. Barron's vision and George's story continued to inspire countless people to reconnect with loved ones, face their regrets, and embrace second chances. Together, they had built something far greater than either could have imagined. A network of kindness that stretched across borders, cultures, and generations. One snowy evening, many winters after their first encounter, Barron visited George. The old man's apartment had transformed over the years, adorned with photos and mementos from a life that had grown rich with new memories. The once empty walls were now alive with stories. Pictures of Emily and her family, snapshots of George with friends he had made through Evelyn's embrace, and framed letters from people across the world whose lives had been touched by his journey. George sat in his favorite chair, a blanket draped over his knees, and a peaceful smile on his face. He looked up as Barron entered, his eyes twinkling with the same warmth that had become his signature. "You're late," George teased, though his tone was light and affectionate. Barron laughed, setting down a tin of freshly baked cookies on the table. "Traffic. You'd think New York would have figured out snow by now." George chuckled, shaking his head. Some things never change. The two spent the evening reminiscing, their conversation flowing easily, as it always did. They spoke of the lives they had touched, the lessons they had learned, and the people who had become part of their extended family. As the night deepened, George leaned back in his chair, his expression turning thoughtful. "Barron," he began, his voice steady but reflective, "do you know what all this has taught me?" Barron leaned forward, listening intently. "What's that?" George smiled softly, his gaze distant but content. "That it's never too late to be the person you were meant to be. Life doesn't end with mistakes or loss. It begins again every time we choose to try, to love, to forgive." Barron nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. "That's a lesson the world needs to hear, George." "And one you've helped teach," George replied, his eyes meeting Barron's. "You didn't just give me a second chance. You showed me how to live again." That evening, as Barron walked home through the snow-covered streets, he reflected on George's words. Life, he realized, is a tapestry of choices, relationships, and moments. It isn't defined by the chapters that didn't go as planned, but by the courage to keep writing new ones. The story of Barron and George became more than just a tale of kindness and redemption. It became a reminder that no matter how broken things may seem, there is always hope. All it takes is one step, a conversation, a gesture, a willingness to open your heart, and the courage to embrace the possibility of something better. As viewers of this story, the lesson is simple but profound. The greatest gift we can give is the gift of ourselves. Whether it's a moment of kindness to a stranger, an apology to a loved one, or the courage to mend what's broken, our actions can create ripples of change far beyond what we can see. No matter how distant someone feels or how heavy our regrets may seem, it's never too late to start again. The power to reconnect, to love, and to heal is always within reach. All we need is the heart to try. And so, as you go through your own journey, remember the story of Barron and George. In a world often rushing forward, sometimes all it takes to change a life is stopping for a moment, asking, "Are you okay?" and truly listening to the answer.